My wife secretly sold our family home for $350, $0 behind my back, then used the money to fund her affair with my best friend. Now she's claiming I have no right to contest the sale or the inheritance we were supposed to split, and everything's headed to court. Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, it feels like I've been living in a nightmare that I can't wake up from. Everything changed in a matter of days, and I still can't believe how badly I was. The thing is, I always thought I knew my wife. She was the kind of woman who could charm her way out of any situation, always had a quick comeback, and was fiercely protective of her image. But behind that smile there was something else, something dark and manipulative that I only started to see recently. It all started about 2 months ago. I noticed little things: her phone ringing at odd hours, her sudden need to stay late at work, her avoiding my gaze during dinner. Nothing concrete, just enough to make me suspicious. She'd brush it off, call me paranoid, say I was overthinking, but I knew her too well, was a master at hiding her tracks. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I figured maybe she was stressed or dealing with some work drama. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Then, last week, I found out the truth, well, part of it. It started with a simple text message on her phone. I was in the living room just browsing my emails when I saw a message pop up. It was from someone named Jake, and it was pretty explicit. Something about meeting up and finally crossing the line. I froze, my heart sank. I knew that name, Jake, was her, the guy she always said was just a friend. But reading that message, I knew it was more than that. It was proof she was cheating, and not just emotionally. She was having sex with him. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I started digging. I checked her texts, her social media, her email. It didn't take long to find more. She'd been meeting him after hours, sometimes even during the day when she claimed she was at work. I found hotel receipts, photos of her and Jake together, even a few explicit messages that made my stomach turn. She'd been lying about her whereabouts, about her feelings. She was playing me for a fool. What made it worse was how she reacted when I finally confronted her. I caught her coming home late one night, her makeup smudged, eyes darting around. I blocked her path and demanded the truth. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk and said, "Oh, so now you're spying on me. Grow up, David. I deserve some fun too. You think I'm just supposed to sit around waiting for you to get home every night?" Her words hit me like a punch. It was as if she didn't care that she was destroying everything we had built. She turned it around, making me look like the bad guy for catching her. I asked her how long this had been going on. She rolled her eyes and shrugged. "Since last year, maybe longer. Honestly, I was bored. You're never around, always working. Jake, just someone I met, and yeah, we've been having sex. So what? It's not like I owe you an explanation." Her attitude was infuriating. She was so nonchalant, like she didn't even care that she was ruining our marriage. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief. How could she be so callous? How could she betray me like that? The emotional hit me hard. I felt numb at first, then angry, so angry I wanted to scream. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I let this happen. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. Now I wasn't sure I knew anything about her or about myself. For days I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Jake, heard her lie, felt the betrayal all over again. It was like my world was crumbling and I was helpless to stop it. But what hurt the most was realizing that didn't see me as someone she needed or cared about anymore. She was more interested in her affair, her secret life. She told me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid. She said, "You're just jealous because I'm finally happy. Jake makes me feel alive. Maybe you should try to keep up." That was the moment I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't quite sure what. Part of me just wanted to run, to escape the pain. The other part wanted justice, wanted her to feel some of the hurt she'd caused me. I didn't know what was worse, losing her or losing myself in this mess. That's where I am now. Still trying to process everything, still trying to figure out what comes next. I know I can't keep living in this state of shock and anger forever, but right now, it feels like I'm stuck in a nightmare I can't wake up from. After I found out about this affair, everything changed in an instant. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but somehow the pain kept growing, spreading through every part of me. I kept replaying that night over and over, trying to make sense of how I missed all the signs. I'd always prided myself on being a good husband, attentive and caring. But clearly I was blind to what was happening right under my nose. The betrayal was so deep, so complete, I almost wondered if I was living in a different reality. The first thing I did was confront her again. I couldn't let it go, not without some kind of explanation. I told her I knew about Jake, about the hotel receipts, the messages. Her reaction was exactly what I expected. She shrugged and rolled her eyes, acting like I was blowing things out of proportion. David, you're being paranoid. You always overreact. Jake is just a friend and those messages are nothing. You're making a big deal out of nothing, she snapped. Her voice was sharp, almost angry that I dared to accuse her. She was so dismissive, like I was the crazy one. I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes, the way she avoided eye contact, the slight tremor in her voice when she spoke. But I didn't have concrete proof at that moment, just enough to make me furious. I told her I'd be checking her phone, her emails, everything. That night I stayed up late going through her stuff. I found even more evidence, screenshots of their chats, explicit photos, plans to meet again. It was like a punch to the stomach every time I uncovered another lie. The next day, I decided I had to face her with everything I found. I sat her down, laid out all the evidence, and demanded she tell me the truth. Her response: she looked at me with that same bitchy smirk and said, "You're crazy. You're just jealous because I'm finally happy. Jake makes me feel alive and you're just too blind to see it." She had the audacity to claim she was doing this for herself, that I was the one who'd driven her away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could she be so cold, so calculated? I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. I'd always been the one to support her, to make her feel loved. And now I was the one being tossed aside like trash. I started to see her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd used me and then discarded me when it suited her. I told her I couldn't stay in this marriage anymore, not after she'd betrayed me so completely. She just laughed and said, "You're wasting your time. I've already moved on. The house, the money, we're not splitting anything anymore. I sold the house behind your back and I used that money to fund my affair. And guess what? I don't care what you do now." That was the moment I realized she'd done something much worse than cheat. She'd taken our life savings, our family home, and blown it all on some sick game with Jake. I was stunned. She had no remorse, no guilt, only that bitchy attitude that made me want to scream. I found out she secretly sold our house for $350, $0, without telling me. She used that money to pay for her apartment with Jake, to go on trips, to fund her secret life. All the while, she was acting like she was the victim. I couldn't believe she was so brazen. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I had no right to contest the sale or the inheritance we were supposed to split. She told me I was just a jealous, insecure loser, and that everything was headed to court. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, a surreal hell where the woman I loved and trusted had become a complete stranger. I was furious, but also crushed that she could do this to me, to us. I spent the next few days in a fog. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I thought about what she did, selling our home behind my back, using the money for her affair, I felt a deep, aching rage. How could she be so callous? How could she steal from our family, betray everything we'd built? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this, not without some kind of punishment. But what? I knew I had to fight back, legally if necessary. I started to get my head around the idea of going to court, of fighting her for what was rightfully ours. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I wasn't going to let her walk off with everything, leaving me broken and penniless. I began to plan my next moves, thinking about lawyers, about exposing her lies, about reclaiming what was mine. But underneath all that, there was a part of me that just felt numb. The betrayal was so complete, I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust again, if I'd ever feel whole after this. In the meantime, she kept up her act, acting like she was the innocent victim, that I was the crazy one. She told everyone I was overreacting, that I'd become paranoid. She even had the nerve to say I was jealous of Jake. But I knew the truth now, and that was enough to fuel my resolve. I was done being the fool. I was done being her pawn. Now, I needed to figure out how to take back what she'd stolen and make her pay for what she'd done. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of emotion and planning. Every time I thought I had a handle on things, some new piece of evidence or a fresh lie she told threw me off course. Was relentless in her manipulations, calling me paranoid, accusing me of being jealous, insisting she was the victim. She even had the nerve to say that I was the one who pushed her into Jake's arms because I was always working or never paying attention. That was the moment I realized she was a master at twisting the truth, turning the blame around so I'd feel guilty or crazy. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew what I saw, what I found, and I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. I started talking to a lawyer, someone who specialized in property disputes and infidelity cases. I needed to understand my rights, especially since she had sold our house behind my back and used the money without my knowledge or consent. It was clear she'd been planning this for a while, probably since she met Jake. I also did some digging into her financials. Turns out, she'd been funneling money into her secret accounts, probably to hide her tracks. I found bank statements, wire transfers, even some cash withdrawals. She'd been planning her escape for months, I think. The more I uncovered, the more furious I became. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we had, including our future? I had trusted her, loved her, and she'd been planning her betrayal all along. One day, I confronted her again. I told her I knew about the money she'd stolen, about the house sale, and that I was taking legal action. Her reaction was as vile as I expected. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said, "You're not going to do anything. That house was mine and I sold it legally. You're just a jealous loser who can't accept that I don't need you anymore." Her voice dripped with contempt. She was so convinced she was untouchable, so certain she'd gotten away with everything. But I knew better. I decided I had to play her game, but on my terms. I started gathering every piece of evidence I could find: texts, emails, receipts, witness statements. I even hired a private investigator to look into her activities. Turns out she'd been meeting Jake at a fancy hotel downtown, sometimes multiple times a week. She'd even lied about going on business trips when she was really just with him. I found hotel booking confirmations, photos of her entering and leaving those places. It was all so disgusting. She'd been living a double life for a long time, and I was the fool who didn't see it coming. Meanwhile, she kept up her act of being the innocent victim. She told everyone I was crazy, that I was overreacting, that I was just jealous. She painted herself as the wronged wife, the victim of my supposed paranoia. That made me furious. How dare she try to turn everyone against me? How dare she pretend she was innocent? I knew the truth, and I was going to make sure everyone else knew it too. I started preparing for the legal fight. I talked to my lawyer about contesting the sale of the house, about claiming my rightful share of the inheritance we were supposed to split. I also started to think about how to get her to pay for what she'd stolen from us, emotionally, financially, and legally. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I was done being the victim. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine. The thing that hurt the most was how callous she'd become. She didn't even try to deny the affair anymore. She just shrugged and said, "Yeah, Jake and I are together now. You should move on, David. It's over." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much she'd hurt me. I knew I had to stay strong for myself and for what's right. Looking back now, I realize I was naive for so long. I trusted her completely, and that trust was shattered in an instant. But I also learned that sometimes you have to fight for yourself, even when it feels like the world is falling apart around you. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know I can't stay in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I have to rebuild my life, even if it means starting over from nothing. That's the hard truth I'm facing now. The legal process moved faster than I expected, probably because I had all the evidence stacked against her. Confidence that she could do whatever she wanted, sell the house behind my back and walk away unscathed, started to crumble once I handed everything over to my lawyer. She was claiming she had the right to do as she pleased, that the house was her property now because she'd sold it legally and used the money for her own purposes. But I knew better. The house was jointly owned, and she'd violated our agreement not to mention the law by selling it without my consent. We filed a suit to contest the sale and to claim my share of the inheritance. I was determined to fight her every step of the way. I also made sure to include the evidence of her affair, her secret bank accounts, and the expenses she'd racked up using the money. I wanted the court to see exactly who she was, someone willing to lie, cheat, and steal to get what she wanted. It was a hard fight, but I felt a strange sense of clarity. I was finally standing up for myself, no matter how much she tried to paint me as the villain. Meanwhile, was not backing down. She doubled down on her lies, insisting she was the victim, that I was just jealous and insecure. She told friends and family I was crazy and possessive for questioning her. I heard from some mutual friends that she was spreading stories about how I was unstable and abusive. That made me angry, but I also knew I had to stay calm. I couldn't let her turn things around on me, not when I had all the evidence on my side. What was truly shocking was the way she tried to gaslight me even during the court proceedings. She'd make up stories about how I was controlling, how I didn't support her dreams, and that she had to seek happiness elsewhere because I was so boring. It was like she was trying to rewrite history to make herself look like the victim, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew her game. I knew she was trying to manipulate everyone around her, including the judge. The court hearings were intense. I could feel her smirk whenever she thought I wasn't looking, trying to undermine me with her lies. I stayed composed, presenting my evidence clearly and calmly. I wanted the court to see her for who she really was, someone who'd betrayed her vows, stolen from our family, and lied her way through it all. When the judge finally made the ruling, it was clear I had the law on my side. The sale of the house was declared invalid, and I was awarded my rightful share of the inheritance. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Was furious, of course. She refused to accept the court's decision at first, threatening to appeal and claiming I was trying to ruin her. But the truth was out, and her lies were exposed. She was forced to hand over the money she'd stolen, and I started the process of reclaiming what was mine. It wasn't easy. There were still emotional scars and a lot of pain to process, but I was finally taking back control of my life. I also decided to cut her out of my life completely. I couldn't have someone like her in my corner anymore, someone who'd betrayed me so badly. I moved into a new apartment, started therapy, and focused on rebuilding myself. It was hard, no doubt about it. Trusting again seemed impossible and the wounds ran deep, but I knew I had to keep going for my own sake. Looking back now, I realize how much I learned about myself through all this. I learned that even when everything seems to be falling apart, you can find strength you never knew you had. I learned that some people are willing to destroy everything just to satisfy their selfish needs. And I learned that sometimes, the only way to get justice is to fight for it. No matter how exhausting or painful it may be. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone in a similar situation, it's this: don't stay silent. Don't let someone else's lies define your life. Stand up, gather your proof, and fight for what's right. Because in the end, you're the only one who can truly take control of your future. After the court's decision, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The legal battle was over, and I had finally reclaimed what was mine, my share of the house sale and the inheritance she tried to steal. But the emotional damage lingered. This betrayal wasn't just about money or the house. It was about trust, about believing in someone who turned out to be completely different behind my back. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it coming, how I could have been so blind. I moved out of the apartment I'd gotten after everything happened. I needed space, physical and emotional, to sort through the mess she left behind. I started seeing a therapist, trying to piece myself back together. It was a slow process. Some days I felt like I was making progress, and other days I wondered if I'd ever truly heal from this. The pain of betrayal runs deep, and it's not something you get over overnight. One thing I realized is how much actions affected my view of everything, my self-esteem, my trust in people, even my judgment. I used to think I was a rational guy, careful with my money and cautious about who I let into my life. But her betrayal shook all that. I had to rebuild my sense of self from scratch, learning to trust myself again. I started doing small things, reconnecting with old friends, taking up hobbies I'd abandoned, and focusing on my career. There was also the fallout with friends and family. Some of them couldn't believe what she'd done, while others took her side, calling me paranoid or jealous. That was hard to swallow. The people I thought I knew, the people I trusted, seemed to be divided. It made me realize how many hidden secrets people carry, how appearances can be so deceiving. I learned not to take anyone's word for granted anymore. As I moved forward, I also started to think about the future. I knew I didn't want to stay in a relationship built on lies. I didn't want someone who would betray me and then try to gaslight me into thinking I was the crazy one. I decided I'd focus on myself, on healing, on rebuilding my life, and on making sure I never let someone manipulate me again. I knew I had to be cautious, but I also realized I deserved happiness and honesty. It wasn't easy, especially when I'd hear about and Jake living their happy life together. That sting of knowing she'd chosen someone else, stolen from me, still lingered, but I kept reminding myself I was better off without her. I deserved someone who would respect me, who would be honest and faithful. I started to see that sometimes you have to lose everything to find a better version of yourself. Looking back, I've learned a lot about betrayal, trust, and resilience. I've learned that some people are willing to destroy everything for their own selfish needs, but that doesn't mean you have to be destroyed along with them. You can pick up the pieces, rebuild, and come out stronger. It's a long road and I still have bad days, but I'm finally moving forward. And honestly, that's the best decision I've made, choosing to take control of my life again, no matter how hard it was. Because at the end of the day, I know I'm worth more than the lies she tried to sell me. Now that I've gone through everything, the legal battles, the heartbreak, the rebuilding, I look back and realize how much I've grown. It's funny how life throws you into the fire, and somehow you come out with scars but also a new understanding of what really matters. I used to think love and trust were the foundation of everything, but now I see that honesty is the real key. Without it, everything crumbles, no matter how beautiful it once was. I've learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who people really are. Actions showed her true colors: selfish, manipulative, and totally disconnected from any sense of loyalty or decency. But more importantly, I learned that I am stronger than I ever thought. I survived the worst kind of betrayal and came out the other side still standing. That's something I didn't think was possible when I was drowning in heartbreak. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone reading this who's going through something similar, it's this: don't ignore the signs. Trust your gut. When something feels off, don't brush it aside. And if you find yourself betrayed, don't be afraid to fight for what's right. It's not just about the money or the house. It's about reclaiming your dignity, your peace, and your future. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to confront the pain head-on and take control of your life again. I've realized that happiness isn't something you find in someone else. It's something you create for yourself. And even after all this, I believe I'll find it again. I'm not going to let her betrayal define me. Instead, I'll use it as a lesson, a reminder that I deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. I'll rebuild my life piece by piece, with the hope that someday I'll look back at this chapter and see it as the moment I finally took back my power. So here I am, stronger, wiser, and more cautious than before. I know now that trust has to be earned and love has to be built on truth, and I'll never settle for anything less again. That's the final lesson I've learned from all of this: trust yourself, stand your ground, and never let anyone steal your peace. Because in the end, your happiness is worth fighting for, no matter how dark the night gets.